Well, hey fans, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Spoilers, and today we'll be talking spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home is a phenomenal film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've seen it 3 times now. Saw it opening night alone, saw it Friday night with the fam, and then I saw it Sunday night in IMAX. And I gotta say, if you can see it in IMAX, please go see it in IMAX. It is wonderful looking at it on that giant screen. But like I said, thoroughly enjoyed it. It is definitely top 5 MCU. I believe I gave it a 10 out of 10 on the blog. Go and check out that review. There are some mild spoilers in it, but not as much as I'm about to go over now. But so basically, the premise of the film, you got Peter Parker after the events of Spider-Man: Far From Home. Everybody knows who he is. It is affecting Aunt May. It is affecting his friends, Ned and MJ. So he's like, well, let me try and at least fix things for them. In doing so, he goes to Doctor Strange. He's like, hey, can you make people forget what Mysterio did? Can you go back in time and change that? And he's like, I don't have the time stone anymore. And it's funny that Doctor Strange is no longer Sorcerer Supreme. Wong is the Sorcerer Supreme because since Doctor Strange blipped for 5 years, somebody had to be in charge. So it went to Wong. So when he came back, Wong's still there. Wong still gets it. So I thought that was pretty great. And Peter's like sad. He's like, I'm sorry I wasted your time. Doctor Strange's like, no, you didn't waste my time. Doctor Strange actually cares for this guy. He's like, we've went through a lot. I care for you. And Wong makes this comment about forgetting. And Doctor Strange's like, we can do a forgetting spell. Just to make everybody forget that you're Spider-Man. So, bam, they go do that. Wong's like, it's fine. Leave me out of it. And speaking of Wong, there's no connection to Shang-Chi in The Legend of the Ten Rings. That's what he's doing with Abomination. I thought there would be some, but we don't get into that. But they go to the Undercroft, and Strange attempts to do the spell. Says, everybody's going to forget your Spider-Man, including him. And Peter's like, what? What about MJ? And he's like, okay, fine. So he adds his spell, everybody but MJ. And he's like, well, what about Ned? Okay, stop. Everybody but Ned. And whoa, hold on. What about Aunt May? Okay, everybody but Aunt May. And then Peter keeps thinking about blah, blah, blah. Then the spell just gets out of control because he keeps trying to add people. And then at the end, like, the spell just goes completely out of control. Strange has lost control of the spell. And Peter says, basically, everybody who knew I was Spider-Man before should still know. And that's when you see the multiverse open. You get to see, like, a vision of Lizard. And then Strange, like, contains the spell. And tells Peter, look, I had to contain that spell. You were talking too much. And at this point, he's like really upset with Peter. And he's like, look, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to deal with this. And I'm sorry that you didn't, when you talked to the school, they didn't change their mind. He's like, wait, I can talk to him. And he's like, you telling me you didn't try to talk to them first before having me do this? And he just kicks him out. So that's great. But so then he finds like the lady on the bridge to go talk to her. And then this is when we first see Doc Ock. And Dr. Octopus looks just as good as he did back in Spider-Man 2. The CGI, the de-aging technology they used on his face, first of all, fantastic. He looks just as young as he did. You can't even see the seams of them digitally removing like his wrinkles and extra weight, any of that. So, wow. Bravo to Sony and Marvel for that. He looks fantastic. The tentacles look just as great. If you were old enough to remember back in the original Spider-Man 2, those tentacles were puppets. They were mostly live action. They did some digital, but they couldn't do them all digital back then. But yes, so they were puppets, but they're all digital now. Looked fantastic. Looked very real. So he and Peter fight. Peter has no idea who this guy is, but of course he knows who Spider-Man is. He ends up absorbing some of Peter's nanotech from his suit, which I said would happen. That's how he gets the upgraded tentacles. But in doing so, Peter can now control his arms. So Peter captures him basically, and then they see Green Goblin, and then bam, Doctor Strange teleports him away, and that back in the Undercroft is where he finds Lizard. Doctor Strange is he is captured, and then let's say Doctor Strange, Doc Ock is captured, and then Doctor Strange comes and says, "Hey, look, that spell basically broke apart the multiverse, and anybody in the entire infinite multiverse who knows Peter Parker Spider-Man are coming here." So I thought when I closed it, it was good, but a few of them squeaked through. So that's how you got Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man through, and Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2 came through. And he says, "Look, I don't know how many more of them out there, but you need to fix this." So he takes his spider armor and he puts like a magic spell on it. So he takes his Stark nanotech suit and he like imbues it with magic, and he makes it like this magic web launcher that once the magic web touches the villains from the multiverse, they automatically get transported to the prison, and he can just go back out and capture another one. And he's talking to him, and he's like, "Ooh, I saw another one on the bridge before you transported us here." He was like a flying green elf. Now fans know that this is Green Goblin, and he says, "Well, whatever they are, you need to go capture them." So he brings in Ned and MJ to help him track him down and find him. And actually, rewinding back a little bit, I totally skipped over the whole part. Once we find out that the world finds out that he's Spider-Man, and he's being framed for killing Mysterio, he needs a good lawyer. This is where we see Charlie Cox's Daredevil back, and it's a quick scene. It's probably like a few minutes tops, but it's fantastic, and it was fantastic use of the character. We don't need to see him actually as Daredevil in this film. As a matter of fact, we didn't even need to see Matt Murdock, but it was basically to establish, hey, yes, Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, is our MCU's Daredevil. And we do get to see him use some of his powers, basically like a guy throws a brick through Peter's window, says "Mysterio forever," and like Charlie Cox is Matt Murdock, he catches it without even looking. Of course, he's blind anyway, and Peter's like, "How did you do that?" And he's like, "I'm a very good lawyer," and hands him the brick. So that was phenomenal, and more on him later, in terms of a theory that I have. But it was fantastic, fantastic scene. But so Ned and MJ, they're looking for other multiversal threats that came through, and this is when Otto Octavius tells them that in my world, Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, died years ago. So there's no way that could be him, because of the multiversal displacement. It's also time displacement. They both came over, and of course, Sandman comes through as well. And he's like, both of them are dead. I'll get more on that later. But he's like, you're going out there chasing a ghost. So he goes out to find Green Goblin, sees like the ground moving, and he's like, you guys see that? And then this is when Electro appears. So Electro appears, and he tries to web him and send him to the prison, but because he's made out of energy, it just goes right through him and it transports a tree. But Electro starts to attack him, and he's saved by Sandman. He's like, "Hey, Peter, it's me, Flint Marko. You remember?" And he's like, "Different Peter, but can you help me take down this guy?" He's like, "Sure." Now, we don't know exactly when in time this Flint Marko's from, and the fact that he's saying, "Hey, it's me, Flint Marko, do you remember?" It could be this is like 20 years later. Well, I guess it wouldn't be 20, it'd be more like 15 years. So it could be like 15 years later version of Flint Marko, just like the older version of Peter who appears later. Or it could be right after the events of Spider-Man 3, maybe like a year or even a few weeks. But he helps him out. And Jamie Foxx gets his body back, and he's all strange. He's like, "I got my body back." He says, "Hey, buddy, you're in a different dimension. You're also in the woods or whatever." But he's like, "Oh, so that's why the energy feels different here." And that'll explain why his electricity is yellow instead of blue. Good job. And so they give him some clothes because he's butt naked. Jamie Foxx is great in the role. He's hilarious. Like, I'm glad they decided to change the character. But the thing about it, the change to the character makes perfect sense. It's not just like, well, part of it is like Jamie Foxx is like, I don't want to be blue anymore. I don't want to sit through all that makeup. But it makes sense because he gets dissipated in Amazing Spider-Man 2, reappears in this universe, and he starts out blue. You see him forming as blue. He starts to absorb the yellow electricity. They pull down on the power lines, and he's got his normal body back. Part of it, he's in a different dimension. The electricity wouldn't turn him blue like that. And he looks different. He has like a beard, a nice haircut. Part of that is because his physique was changed by becoming Electro in his old universe. You saw like when he was getting electrocuted, his teeth are fixing itself and all that. So his new haircut and all that is a result of him basically getting powers. We kind of have seen this before with Steve Rogers getting the super soldier formula. He becomes this bigger, handsomer version of himself. So it makes sense to me. He isn't as geeky, but that is also because he has more charisma to him, more coolness from being that power-hungry villain, or sympathetic villain that he became in Amazing Spider-Man 2. He's not going to go back to his geeky self. Like, he still has that kind of... There's hints of his old self in there. His whole, like, I don't like being in the woods, and there's still old hints of it, but he's more confident now than he was before thanks to having got those powers. So it made total sense why he has more bravado. But he captures him. Sandman's like, whoa, what did you do to him? Sandman's like, I don't trust anybody. You're definitely not my Peter, so I definitely don't trust you. And he sends him there. And then that's when Doctor Strange shows up. And, well, actually, no, I'm getting ahead. Aunt May calls and tells him, hey, one of the guys you're looking for is here. And we find out it's Norman Osborn. He has put the goblin away, and he's trying to get help. And basically, once, he gets Norman Osborn, and his aunt says, you need to help all these guys, they don't, they're all lost. They're not like villains, they're sympathetic villains. And Doctor Strange tells him, like, yeah, they all die in their world fighting Spider-Man, basically. That's what they figure out. So all of these spider people, all these villains come over, and is either right before they died or around the time that they may have died. That's what you're led to believe. So Green Goblin, and also they have to know that Peter Parker's Spider-Man. They don't necessarily have to have seen his face, but they have to know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So, going by that logic, and a couple of them tell their stories. Doc Ock says, I had Spider-Man right in my tentacles. I was squeezing his neck, and then next thing he knows, he was in this universe. So that is right after he was fighting Peter in Spider-Man 2, and he started choking him right before the whole listen to me now scene. That's when he was sucked over. Electro says, I was absorbing energy from the grid, and I was about to become pure energy, and then, I died and ended up here. So that would have been in the scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 where he's just absorbing all the energy, and his thing is overloading before he got overloaded. And then Lizard's like, well, do I die? Which we know in Amazing Spider-Man 1, he doesn't die. So he's either from a future timeline after the Amazing Spider-Man 2, because he still had his lizard abilities, kind of, where he kind of gets out of Ravencroft and attacks Peter again and gets killed, because we also find out that Peter stops pulling his punches and is a lot meaner to villains, which actually he doesn't die because he doesn't know. He's like, hey, do I die? So he knows that, hey, I was alive at the end of my battle. Did something happen later? So yeah, so there's that. Sandman is probably right after Spider-Man 3 and not years later, because he didn't die either. He just floated off. He just got brought over because he knows who Peter Parker is and has seen his face. And of course, Goblin could have been either right after he found out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man or right before this glider impaled him. And that's why you have that whole scene in Spider-Man 1 where the glider's coming, he's like, oh, so maybe that's when he got transported back. Who knows? But all these villains, Peter doesn't want them to die. He's like, we should try and heal them instead. And then Doctor Strange is like, no, this is their fate, and they have this great fight, one of the best fights in the MCU, where they fight in the streets. Strange is using magic, and you can tell that Doctor Strange is holding back because he does not want to hurt Peter. He just wants to save this reality, and like he separates Peter's soul from his body, and he's trying to take the little cube thing back, and like Peter's like dodging him, and you can tell it's because since Peter's not in his body, he's going completely off instinct, his spider sense, which when you see his spirit floating, you can see those little lines that are normally in the comics floating around his head. So his spider sense is still active, and it's just not letting Strange take the box, which is hilarious. But either way, Peter knocks him into Strange knocks Peter into the mirror dimension, and they have this fantastic fight there. It is wonderful. Oh, I can't wait to see the mirror dimension again in Multiverse of Madness. It just looks fantastic. But Peter manages to defeat him by finding out, oh, the mirror dimension is just geometry, and I love geometry. So he traps him there, gets the villains out, manages to, like, all right, we're going to find cures, and you're all going to be great. And there is something wrong with each of them. Like, Doc Ock, of course, his tentacles are in charge, so they create another inhibitor chip, which frees Doc Ock. With Sandman, he's like, yeah, we can cure your sand abilities. That's fine. But Sandman is not, he doesn't really care about being a villain, doesn't care about being cured. He just wants to get home and see his daughter. He loves his daughter. And he's going along to make sure all the villains go along with this plan so he can get back home to his dimension to see his daughter. But with Electro, it's that he can absorb electricity, one, and his body's producing an excess amount of electricity. So that's how his powers work. So Peter's like, I can put this thing on your chest, and it will absorb all that excess electricity from your body, and you won't hurt people before. Because you remember in the old one, it was that he couldn't control it, and that he was zapping people just by even trying to touch them. So this absorbs all that excess electricity. So he should still have his power. Same thing with Doc Ock, actually, because Doc Ock, even though he's still in control, those tentacles are now kind of like, they're fused to his spine unless he gets them surgically removed. So he should still have his, Doc Ock still has his tentacles, Electro should technically still have his powers, but that inhibitor thing on his chest would, help control that. Sandman, of course, would not have his powers, he would turn back to normal. And Lizard, of course, would not have his powers, he would also turn back to normal. So, but during the scene, it's great. He's healing everybody, and then all of a sudden, Norman's working on his cure, which it's not really explained what Norman's cure is. It's either A, it removes his goblin powers completely, and he's just a normal human again, or B, it allows him to keep his goblin powers, and it just removes that alternate personality that came with it, the craziness, which is funny because it's almost like the super soldier formula in the regular MCU. Like, the super soldier formula, it enhances what is already there. Norman was already kind of paranoid before. He's not a bad guy, but he was already paranoid, so that creates a dual personality. Harry was driven by revenge, so when he took it, he became even angrier. But he was able to conquer that, so you're led to believe that Harry had an enhanced version of the formula. And if not, well, whatever, they fix it. So I think they're just getting rid of that personality and not getting rid of the super strength. So, but this great scene, Peter Spider-Sense just starts going crazy, and he does not know what's going on. And then he just webs Norman, and bam, you find out that Norman isn't in control anymore. It's the Goblin persona. And that is crazy. Crazy that they decided to do that. That just the Green Goblin being around Peter is danger to him. He didn't even have to do anything. He's just there, and it's considered a danger to his spider sense. That, and Willem Dafoe's performance is fantastic, and that is just a great show. So Norman basically convinces Electro that, we don't need this cure. We're gods. We don't have to listen to normal tiny people. And so Electro, and we kind of find this about the energy is, him watching the energy is like an addiction. It's like an addiction to him. He was just a nobody before. He has this power. He doesn't want to lose the power. So that is kind of what his thing is. He's addicted to this power. So he takes the Stark reactor, which gives him infinite energy. Peter fights Green Goblin, and is just a really good fight. Lizard is there. Now, Lizard, I think, is the most underutilized in this film, and it's kind of sad. He's just kind of there to be a monster. Uh, and more on these. The thing about these villains, okay, Lizard is always in lizard form. Sandman is, for the most part, always in sand form. And you can tell they did this to keep the film a secret. Like, they didn't want to bring the actors on set. So it's like, hey, just we'll dub your lines over, and we'll kind of use footage of you from the other movies to get your physical form to show up. Because you can definitely tell. Like, when Flint Marko shows up physically, they edited that in from Spider-Man 3 footage. Same thing with Lizard. So that they didn't need them there physically. And I get it, you're trying to maintain secrecy, but it just doesn't quite make sense with what has come before with their powers. But this fight with Norman is great. His hoodie gets tattered, so he looks more like the comic book counterpart. And this is where things start to click for not only me, but the entire audience. That before with Spider-Man, we were like, well, when are we going to get the classic, when is Oscorp in the MCU going to show up? When are we going to get to find out, Uncle Ben actually got killed and the great power, great responsibility line comes in. So the glider hits Aunt May. He leaves. All the villains leave. And Aunt May delivers the line to Peter about, with great power comes great responsibility. And she says this to him. And then it turns out she has been wounded from the glider and she dies. So you find out, oh snap, this whole trilogy so far, this has been his origin story in the MCU. This is a different version of Peter. We still don't know like what spider bit him, because it's not an Oscorp spider apparently, but this is a different version of Peter Parker. He didn't have Uncle Ben to give him the line. It was his Aunt May, and it was a phenomenal revelation. And actually more on Uncle Ben later. I got a user on Twitter who gave me an interesting theory about him. But Aunt May dies. He's all alone. MJ and Ned are like feeling bad for him, and they want to find him. So Ned has, they kind of allude to this earlier, that Ned's like, my grandma says we have magic in our family, and sometimes I get tingles in my fingers. And so he has Doctor Strange's sling ring, and he's like, oh snap, I can open portals. So they find Peter Parker, and of course they find Peter Parker. They say, Peter, come on, we're here for you. Jumps through, and once you see the costume, you're like, oh my goodness, that is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man from The Amazing Spider-Man. And the theater I was in, the first night the theater I was in, everybody was like, oh cool, yay. The second night, on Friday night, the theater erupts in applause. It was almost just obnoxious, but I'm glad they were having fun. But like, and then he takes off the mask, and you're like, yep, it's him. So Andrew Garfield, we knew he was in this film, but man, his denials are some of the best acting I have ever seen, especially the one on Good Morning America when he was doing Tick Tick Boom. It is crazy, like how good of an actor this man is. But he's in, and for him, his introduction's hilarious, and then Tobey Maguire comes through, and everybody's excited again. But with the scene, one, Andrew Garfield is having a blast playing Spider-Man again, and Sony, they need to get him back somehow. I'll get more into that later as well, but he's just having so much fun. Tobey Maguire, he's enjoying it as well. Probably not as much, he's older, but yeah. So you can tell for some of these scenes with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, they were not on set with Tom Holland, because they do it where like they'll talk, the scene will cut to Tom Holland, and he'll talk, then the scene will cut back. So they clearly edited those together, and once again, this is to maintain secrecy, because they showed up on set all the time. People would be like, oh, this is definitely what's going on. Like, there are some scenes where they're together, so you can tell they probably shot those together, but everything else, they just did their best to cut it together to make it work. But they come through, they explain to him what happened with Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and great power comes great responsibility. In this scene, where Peter's like telling them that he's going to end it all, it's a great speech that he gives, and it's fantastic acting. But I feel like that scene ends 3 times. He's like, I'm sorry I did this to you. There's a pause. I shouldn't. This isn't my responsibility. There's a pause. Goodbye. Pause. And there's like another pause. I forget exactly how he said it, but there's like so many pauses. Like, they let this go on longer than it should, or it shouldn't have been separated by so much. But like I said, they get together. they of course have a little banter where it's like, "Ew, you have organic webbing," and "Oh, I've always wanted brothers," and I'm such a lame Spider-Man. No, you're amazing. You're amazing. Oh, I need to hear that. Like the meta jokes about Andrew Garfield between the other Spider-Man was great. They don't know who the Avengers are. The whole scene with them is phenomenal, and I have a feeling that we will probably see, if not both of them, at least one of them again further down the line in the MCU. Uh, but but we'll see. So they create the cures. They go to the new and improved Statue of Liberty, where they lure the villains there to have their final battle. Final battle is amazing. Everybody's cured. Jamie Foxx has a great line with Andrew Garfield where he's like, "I thought you were gonna be black," and Andrew Garfield's like, "Oh, sorry, man." And he's like, "There's got to be a black Spider-Man out there somewhere." Of course, there's an allusion to Miles Morales. And people are saying, like, not Andrew Garfield, Jamie Foxx should know that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is white since he knows Peter's identity. And if you go back and watch those movies, I don't think he actually ever saw his face. I think he was just told that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. I think he had that much information, but he never saw his face. So that's how, he just knew the name. But of course, they save the day. Peter has this final confrontation with Goblin. Doctor Strange comes back through, and he's about to kill him, but Tobey Maguire saves him and stops it. But Tobey Maguire's stabbed, and everybody thinks he's going to die, but he doesn't. And then the spell gets loose again, and Peter's like, "Just make everybody forget that I'm Peter Parker." And he has to say goodbye to his friends. It's a touching moment, and that explains why he's not showing up later, because people don't know, like, who Peter Parker is anymore. Now, the way the spell works, the way they talk about it, all the events that happened with Spider-Man before, I think, are still valid. So because everybody still knows who Spider-Man is. So I believe any of the Avengers or anybody else who had any relationship with Peter, that's forgotten. Any relationship they have with Spider-Man is still there. So, like, Happy would know, I did all this stuff to help Spider-Man, but I don't remember his identity. And they don't quite explain, is it like, I did know his identity, but for some reason I can't remember? Or if it's like, I don't know who Peter is at all, I never knew the identity. So we'll kind of figure that out as it goes on. But now he can remain in anonymity while he continues his hero work. And you know what, this Let's Talk Spoilers is getting a little long, but I don't care. There's just so much in this film and that I want to talk about. But at the end, the other Peters and the villains go home. Things that I'm not sure, like Doc Ock, when he takes the Tony Stark arc reactor off of a Electro, and he holds on to it, and he meets his Peter, says, "The power of the sun in the palm of my hands." That whole talk. That's basically an arc reactor is what Otto Octavius wanted to create in his world with his whole little sun thing. And I don't ever see him return it. So when he returns to his timeline, healed, like, does he still have that arc reactor? Because all the upgrades to their suit that they still had on him disappeared with him. So I think he's taking the arc reactor back, and he's going to give his world renewable energy, which would be fantastic. And I'll get more into the variants in a little bit, but yeah. Toby and Andrew, they do the whole, if you've seen the meme where the guy that does the peace sign and just fades away, they do that. Hilarious. So that's going to be my new fade away meme. Peter, of course, he's an orphan now. He lost Aunt May. He's on his own. His friends don't remember him. All anybody knows is that there's a Spider-Man. He makes a new suit, and it looks just like the comics. Classic red and blue, black webbing. It looks so good. It's dark and in the snow, so we'll see how that looks in the light. But from what you get to see, it looks fantastic. I do want to know how much of the Stark technology he's going to keep in the suit. Because while I wasn't a big fan of him pretty much being Iron Man Jr., I do like some of the changes they made with the Stark technology. I liked in not No Way Home, in Homecoming, how the suit's like really, really big until he presses the spider logo and it shrink wraps like around his body. And that let me know, okay, when he gets older, he'll always fit in his suit. So it doesn't look like they're keeping that, but I hope they do, because I like that change. It makes a lot of sense. I like the little spider robots, so you can have trackers on people. I don't know if they'll still have that. I don't know if you still have the eye goggles. They've kind of made it clear that in this universe he needs those eye goggles to help him control his spider sense and his vision better. So we'll see if he still has those. I think he will. Uh, like I said, we don't know if he has all the technology internally. They're developing Spider-Man for us, so we will see. This is the only one of these films to end with Spider-Man swinging. Technically, well, the last one ended with him swinging with Mary Jane. So before that one scene, so yeah. But we get the classic Spider-Man swinging through New York, and it's winter, and he like dives down into we don't know where, and it could just be a cool ending. Now, two things about this ending. One, to me, it looks like he turns into a cartoon. When you watch it, it looks like he's digitized or something. So I have a feeling he might pop up in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 or Part 2. We will see, but I have a feeling about that. And two, since it's Christmas, people are thinking he's going to show up at the end of Hawkeye and save them when they're in that ice rink. I think that would be fantastic if they managed to do that. And Hawkeye's like, hey, Spider-Man, thanks. And she's like, do you know who he is? Nobody knows who he is, but he's a really cool hero. That would be great. We'll find out with that. But back to some other things I skipped over. The Uncle Ben thing. The user on Twitter, his name's like Uber_Kryptonian, and his theory is that in the MCU, Uncle Ben is not dead. He just walked out on Peter and May. And that is a great theory because they don't really talk about Uncle Ben ever, or they don't treat him with the same reverence that the others treat their Uncle Ben. So I like the theory that his Uncle Ben is not the important person in his life. It was his Aunt May. And his Uncle Ben either walked out on them or something else happened to Uncle Ben, and we'll find out later. So that's great. We don't exactly, like, when the sky breaks open and sees other dimensions, we do get to see some people who know that some other Spider-Man villains. You can definitely see Kraven, you can definitely see Scorpion, you can definitely see Rhino. I think you can also see Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy, because they're like some feminine figures who are walking. So I'm pretty sure that's who that is. The new suit he does make, then you can tell it's inspired by the other two Spider-Man because of the more blue and red color. I did like that. What else do we have here? Oh, yes. So, with all these variants that were created, since they are now healed, when they go back to their respective timelines, they go back to when they were displaced. So this creates tons of even more timelines. So you'll have, you'll have a timeline where Norman Osborn's Green Goblin doesn't die, Harry doesn't become New Goblin. You'll have a timeline where Dr. Otto Octavius doesn't die. He's healed. He probably still drowns the sun. He has their arc reactor now, and they have infinite power. You have a timeline where Sandman comes back and he just falls out of the sky because he doesn't have his powers anymore and falls to his death. I don't know how that works, but yeah, where he doesn't have his powers. Also, he's still a wanted man in his timeline, so those powers could have helped him. We'll see. I don't know exactly about that, but we'll see. I don't even think it'll be mentioned, but yeah. Also, like, of course, you got Lizard and Electro as well. But the purpose of like healing them so they don't become villains. If it were me, if I'm Spider-Man, is like I wouldn't want to heal them as much as can we convert them so they can become heroes in the other timelines? Because having people help Peter would be better than just healing his villains. How about convincing them to become heroes instead? That's what I'm saying. But it was a fantastic film. Oh, small thing. So it is mentioned earlier on in the film that he's like, I was helping out Nick Fury, and he's like, the guy with the Department of Damage Control says Nick Fury's been off world for over a year. How do they know that? I thought, like, after Age of Ultron, everybody thinks Nick Fury is dead, I thought. And he's, like, doing stuff, like, in secrecy. I thought that was the whole point of that, and that he's doing the stuff in space in secret, and Talos is pretending to be him on Earth, also in secret. So, I don't know exactly what's going on with that. and Peter seems a little bewildered by it as well. It'll tie in a Secret Invasion, I'm sure, but hopefully get a little more knowledge about that. And I'm rambling here at the end, but that's just what happens. Um, but yeah, the thing about all this variance, I think they will all be allowed to continue to exist because of what's going on with Kang, and he's letting all the timelines go wild. So I think that's fine. We might see what happens to them in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. The post-credit scene, of course, is Venom. He appears, and he's talking to the bar about, hey, this world has a lot of heroes, and he's like, man, you should go meet Spider-Man, before he gets zapped back to his own reality. But you see a little piece of the symbiote is left behind, so that'll allow them to have their own Venom in the MCU with a black suit. Now, I don't know how that works. Like, how does he just drop symbiote? Or it doesn't make sense. Matter of fact, him even being there doesn't make sense at all, because as far as he knows, there's no Spider-Man in his universe, and he doesn't know Peter Parker's identity, so how can the spell bring him over? Now, if it were Topher Grace's Venom, that makes perfect sense. Like, but they don't explain, like, so did the spell get confused and bring over the wrong Venom? Is it that the symbiote, because he has this infinite knowledge and he's connected to symbiotes from even other dimensions that he was brought over? I hope they can explain that. I do believe what they should do is just make the Amazing Spider-Man film set in the Venom universe so that those two can meet, and that way Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man can definitely fight an alien for once. So that'd be great. But Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal, they've already admitted to, yes, Amy Pascal first said we're going to do another trilogy, but they have confirmed, yes, we are indeed working on a Spider-Man 4. I don't know if they will continue doing the home titles, but if they do, and he continues to partner with another hero, I think what they should do is, in the first one, since he's alone now, it should be Spider-Man Home Alone, which you can see on the first, like on that board with all the titles, that is a title, but they say there's a copyright issue with that, so they can't use it. But the Home Alone franchise is now owned by Disney, which is partnering with Sony, so that would allow Sony to use it if they wanted to. So it should be Spider-Man Home Alone. Daredevil should be his partner, and then they should be taking down the Kingpin and other smaller villains. You could bring back Vulture, you can finally do Scorpion, Hobgoblin, Prowler, Tinker, Shocker. All those people should come back. The next one, and I have a whole article about this, should be Spider-Man Home Stretch. That's when we should get Fantastic Four, and the black suit should finally appear, and they take down Doctor Doom and the Blue Beetle. Not take down Doctor Doom, at least take down Blue Beetle. Doctor Doom is hinted at. And that should come after the Fantastic Four film. Well, all of this will. And then the last one, I think you get Spider-Man Home Invasion. I don't know exactly what you'll do with that. I just think that's a cool title. I do want to see him team up with Deadpool at some point, and I think that's when we should get our MCU version of Venom. However, whatever happens, it's a great film. You should definitely check it out in theaters. See it in IMAX if you can. But that is it for me, guys. Remember, you can view this spoiler review on YouTube and the blog, flipfrogllc.com/flixfrog. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. And please, pretty please, everybody, hey, come here, listen. Make sure that you subscribe. Yes, subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, everything. Make sure you like, comment, and share. The next Let's Talk Spoilers will be probably What If. I think we'll stick with the multiversal stuff. And after What If, we'll see what I have time for. I think I will try to get What If done before the end of the year, and I'll probably try and take a break for the holidays and start doing them again in January. But until then, until next time, I'll be seeing you.